Welcome to Aspen Leading Edge. Today, my guest is Korin Munsterman, and she is a professor of practice and director of the Legal Education Technology Program at University of North Texas, UNT, Dallas College of Law. So welcome, Professor Munsterman.
Thank you very much. Please call me Korin.
Okay, Korin. Well, I am so thrilled to have you because you have written a couple of books that are so timely. In fact, I know that there's been great interest already in your most recent book, but you are a technologist, someone who is trained in technology and also brings the legal perspective. And you've been working on the technology program at UNT, but you've also written a couple of books, Artificial Intelligence and the Practice of Law in a Nutshell, and most recently, GenAI in Legal Education, a Practical Guide for Professors and Students, published through Cali's E. Langdale Press. So before we get to the books, I'd love to learn a little bit about your experience and your journey to UNT Dallas.
It's long. I worked in law firms for quite a while before I went to law school, and I was in different roles. I was an office manager for a while, and that meant that I had to deal with the case management software and the computers and the billing software and all of that kind of stuff. So I always had a technological bent, so it fit well. I was paralegal for a little while, looking for more efficient ways to summarize depositions. Now would be a breeze, but then not so much. And then I decided to go to law school. First, I went to library school, thinking I was going to be a law librarian. And even in library school, I was more on the technical side of things. I was very curious about what the comparison was between a search engine like Google and a card catalog, which was the more efficient. So I wrote my thesis on that. Turned out they're about the same. Librarians are quite good at indexing. So
I was going to ask you what the answer was. So it was about the same, huh? I wouldn't have guessed that.
Yeah. But you had to do a lot more like cross-referencing in a card catalog where the engine would do it for you. But then after that, I went to Southern New England School of Law, which is now UMass Dartmouth. I became the director of technology there. I started as the electronic services coordinator librarian, I think it was, and I ran all the CD-ROM towers and, Lexis and Westlaw were distributed by CD-ROM at the time. I developed the first law school website. And from there, I went to Harvard Business School, felt a bit of a fish out of water, but I ran their media services department, which was very significant there. They had all these student organizations. I'm sure they still have, but just the technology student org had a conference, and there were thousands of people who came to this thing. It was the first time that we webcasted it live and then also made it available on demand. And we had all these trucks outside to help assist with the webcast. It was crazy. And, we had people like Steve Ballmer and Larry Ellison there. It was huge. It was absolutely huge.
Wow.
Yeah. And from there, I went to Harvard Law School, where I was the director of technology for clinical programs. And I put in, they were very uneven across all the different clinics. Some had very good funding, some did not. So the Hale and Dorr Legal Services Center had a practice management system, but the Harvard Legal Aid Bureau had nothing. And I was trying to manage the tech for all of them and wanted to even things out without costing the law school more money. And so I talked to Lexis that had Time Matters, I think it was, which was a customizable program that gave that case management to all of the clinics, which really helped them become more efficient. And so that was big for them. It also helped us provide reporting to the Legal Services Corporation to get funding for the different clinics. And then I went to American University, Washington College of Law. I worked with Billy Joe Kaufman, who was just fantastic, and the dean at the time, Claudio Grossman, who, loves technology, and I was able to do a lot of things. We were the first law school to podcast all of our events. We were even featured on MTV.
On MTV?
MTV. Why they cared, I don't know, but we were featured on MTV, and we webcasted everything, and we put in a bunch of different systems there, worked with the clinics, of course, on technology. And then where did I go from there? I went back to Harvard for a little while. I went into the university level. So it was called Hewitt, Harvard University IT. So mostly supporting the arts and sciences, but actually supporting the enterprise level of the technology available at all of the schools and colleges. And then I went to Florida coastal and decided to be a librarian again. If you work in technology and you're a librarian, it's very hard to make this switch back to being like a library dean.
Right.
And it gave me the opportunity to do that. So I was glad for that. But I also ran technology, put in a bunch of systems there, and then took a circuitous route sort of to UNT Dallas, largely because my husband had been following my career up and down the East Coast for a couple of decades, and he had an opportunity. He's from Ireland, and so it took him a while to establish his career in the States because of that. He had an opportunity, and we decided to move to Dallas. And luckily, UNT Dallas was looking for somebody to run legal education technology and teach those classes. And it was perfect timing and a perfect fit.
Oh, that's fantastic. And
Yeah.
boy, the depth and breadth of your experience at so many different institutions doing so many different things with lots of vendors and technology and so many firsts. That's very impressive.
Thank
And
you.
so you must be quite excited to be at the forefront of the artificial intelligence wave right now. So at what point in this career did you decide to write the nutshell on artificial intelligence in the practice of law?
So that came about because I work with a man, Professor Mike Maslanka, who's very prolific. He teaches professional responsibility. He has like 3 or 4 different case books out. One is on employment law, one's on professional responsibility. He just published a short and happy guide about communication. And he was talking to Danny Butane at West and said, hey, AI is a big thing and we have an AI person here. Because I was constantly talking to faculty about AI to the point where the dean was like, stay away from me. You want to replace me with AI, right? I'm sick of hearing about AI everywhere I go. So, and I had a couple of faculty scholarships, faculty development sessions where I talked about using AI and writing about it. And because Professor Maslanka recommended me to Danny, that's how I wound up writing the nutshell, which took a very long time and was very difficult because it's a moving target. With every day, there's a new application. So I tried to stick to general principles about how the systems work, about bias in the systems, all the things that can get you into trouble, about law firm governance, those kinds of issues. And of course, legal ethics, both legal ethics and ethical AI principles, because you need to know about both if you're going to use them reliably. So that's how the nutshell came about.
When was the nutshell published?
April of this year.
Oh, that was just published too. Oh my goodness.
Yes.
What a year for you.
Yeah, and it's huge. It's 900. It's the biggest nutshell they've ever published. It's 916 pages.
Oh my gosh, it hardly seems like it could qualify as a nutshell.
I know. It almost didn't. They weren't sure they could bind it. But it's largely there's a bunch of appendices in this book about governance and how to train lawyers, all the things that law firms need to put in place to make sure that they don't get into any kind of trouble with using the systems.
So that is pretty interesting because I guess a lot of practitioners probably do use nutshells. I was thinking a lot of students do too, but yeah, I guess if you've got the nutshell on your shelf for whatever your substantive area of practice is. So now they could have a 900 something page artificial intelligence in the practice of law in a nutshell. So congratulations on publishing that.
Thank you.
Then you transitioned to GenAI in legal education, a practical guide for professors and students, which also just came out. So first, you talked a little bit about the artificial intelligence nutshell. If you can share a little bit about how you approached GenAI in legal education, and I would like to do kind of a comparison of what you're seeing as the differences are between what we should be doing in legal education with AI and what lawyers should be doing.
So the Callie book, the GenAI book in legal education came about because I present fairly often and I like to give hands-on lessons. It seems like because often when I attend webinars, they talk about generative AI, they talk about ethics, they talk about what it is, what it does, and those kinds of things. But people don't walk away with anything they can actually do. So last summer, a colleague of mine, Ariel May, and I did a couple of webinars for AALS on how do you build a custom GPT for your students. And one of the reasons that I want faculty to understand how this works is because all of the research shows, and there's not a lot in law schools, there's some, but there's not a lot in law schools, but all of the other research, and again, not a lot of research yet because it's so new, show that using instructor-led generative AI leads to success, particularly for the middle of the class and the lower performers. The high achievers are always going to be achieving highly, and right, they don't need the extra help necessarily, but the middle and the lower class do need help. And faculty aren't available 24/7. The school, particularly like mine, where we have first generation law students, or we have students who speak English as a second language, or may have some kind of neurodivergency. Maybe they have a dyslexia, or they have some other kind of learning disability. Generative AI can help them if, and only if, they know how to use it, right? And unfortunately, I think faculty generally assume, well, they're young, they know how to do it.
Yeah.
But that's not the case. Believe me, I have been supporting students in using technology for decades. They don't know how to fix their computers. They don't back anything up. They're terrible users. They can post on social media and they can create video content, but that's about it. And there are many people in this field who say the same thing. So I wanted faculty to have the tools where maybe they had looked at generative AI a couple of years ago and weren't very impressed with the output and didn't really have anybody showing them how to really use it. Or maybe they just want to ban it and put their heads in the sand, which I don't think is the right approach. Sorry, Berkeley, I don't agree. But what happens after I do a presentation generally is somebody will say to me, like either send me an email separately afterwards and say, what you showed was really cool, but I don't really know where to start. And they're embarrassed to ask. And so I thought, while I was finishing up the editing of the nutshell and that back and forth, I thought I should write a book for faculty to put all of this into one place, because people ask for it all the time. Like, what is step one? What platform do I use? What the pros and cons of the platforms? How does this stuff actually even work? Right. And I wanted to also address the concerns that some have about, like, maybe you don't want to use it for education, like in your classroom, but you can use it for other things as well, right? I have this program that I just love called Lecture Lens, where you can upload your syllabus and ask it, look at this syllabus as if you were a student, and then tell me where there are knowledge gaps. Because sometimes faculty can assume that the people they're teaching have knowledge that they don't yet have because you know a topic so well. So this is to fill in those gaps. I also uploaded a transcript of my class and asked it to do an analysis of how the class was. It's like having a peer review without having a peer review.
Those are
Right.
great ideas. I love the knowledge gap use because you're right. When you're too expert at something, it's hard to bring it down to squad level.
Exactly. So it fills in the gaps. And it also, I ask it to generate some kind of lessons or give me some ideas to teach this better. But I loved when it went through my transcript because it told me basically, this won't come as a surprise to you, but by this conversation, it told me to basically shut up. Right. I was talking like the students were engaged in a conversation and I'd interject and it was saying, don't do that. So let them keep talking. And it was
Oh,
right.
that's funny.
It was right. It was absolutely right. So I like that. And then, it generates other things. So there are ways that you can use it as a faculty member, or if you're doing research and you want to write a law review article or a book or something, Notebook LM is a fantastic tool that they can use it for themselves, not necessarily in the class if they're skittish about that. And it kind of wets their toes and brings them around when they can see what the capabilities are.
Well, I'm super excited to read it. I have just downloaded it, and it is available as a download PDF for free. Faculty who are listening to this. I learned about the book on June 21st, 2026, when Seth Chandler posted on his blog, AI for Legal Education, go read a terrific new book on AI in legal education. And he says, this book is very, very good. It is needed and it should be read by, yes, really, everyone connected to legal education today before it ages. So that's pretty high praise from somebody who's really immersed in all of this.
I know. I was shocked.
It's so great. And I'm like probably first or one of the first to get to you to interview you about this. So thank you for being on the
No,
podcast.
no, no, thank you.
What if a faculty member were saying, as you said, where do I start? Obviously, reading the book would be a good place to start. But, I'm preparing my syllabus for the fall. I want to get a little bit of AI experience. Where should I start if I don't want to read the book and apply all the things?
Well, one thing is, for whatever reason, Callie doesn't include the appendices as part of the download or even part of the print version. So you have to go on to the site, the Callie site, and you can download the appendices. And you can go in there and I've got a bunch of prompt language that you can copy and paste and then tweak yourself, and links to the different bots so you can test them to see how well they work. You could deploy the ones I've written. You could rebrand it, because most of mine start with UNTDCOL. And that's really to differentiate the ones I've created from the ones that my students create, because I teach my students how to create these things so that they can use them for study themselves. I'll give you an example. So a professor I work with is teaching a new class in the fall. And at commencement, I saw him and he said, it's finally dawned on me that I need to start using GenAI, and I really don't know what to do. So can I schedule a meeting with you? And I said, yeah, of course. But as luck would have it, my book is coming out. And if you want an advanced copy that, is not fully edited and everything, I'll share the PDF with you. So I did. And he wrote to me last week and said, oh my God, I'm teaching this new class. I had no idea where to start. I was procrastinating. I turned to chapter 7 and now I'm almost done.
That is very high praise.
Yeah. I was very excited about that because that's what it's for, right? I have to do this thing and I don't know how to do the thing. So where's the lesson in learning how to do the thing? And then you can also download it in Word in addition to PDF. So if you download it in Word, you can just copy and paste the prompts that I've written. There is one caveat. I put this in the introduction to the book. I use generative AI all day long, right? I use different platforms for different purposes all day long. And the different platforms that I use have come to know me, right? They know that I've written these books. It knows that what classes I teach. And so it becomes over time used to who you are. It relies on its internal memory to give me outputs that are tailored to what I've requested in the past so I don't have to do as much tweaking as a novice would, right? So the outputs that I have in the book are not necessarily the same outputs that somebody else is going to get. Well, in fact, they'll never be the same output because it's always generating novel content. So I put in a prompt today and 5 minutes later put in the same prompt and I get a different response. I have an example of that in the book itself. So people need to realize it's not one and done. Like you copy and paste Korin's prompt and say, okay, this is my output and it's done. It's an iterative process. So just like you'd have a conversation with a colleague, you're having a conversation with it. Remembering though that it's a machine and it needs to be spoken to as if it's a machine.
That's very good advice. Yeah. And one of the things that I have been changing about my use of AI, and I'm a Claude fan, that's what I really like to use, is making those prompts with Claude having an identity, right? So you are a peer reviewer looking at my syllabus or, my first draft of this book or something like that. You are a student considering law school, that kind of thing. And I found that has really improved the prompting or the results from the prompting.
Yeah, I have a framework called the Correct Framework that I developed with each letter standing for something, right? So C is context, right? Give it as much factual information as you can. The environment is that you're working in. O is for objective, right? I'm doing this because I need to send a letter to my boss, or I'm doing this because I want to improve my class, or whatever your objective is. R is role. That's what you're talking about. And you can have multiple roles, right? You can say, I am a law professor. You are my academic dean sitting in on my class, or you are my student looking at the syllabus, or you are whatever. So it can have multiple roles at the same time. It can even have 3 roles. In one of my client interviewing counseling bots that I created, it establishes a client role. It knows that it's dealing with a student who's practicing, but it also has a coach role so that the student can jump out at any time within the conversation and say, okay, now I need you to be my coach. How am I doing? Right. So it can maintain multiple roles at the same time. R is restrictions. What it shouldn't do, which is super important, right? It contains it when you put in restrictions. E is expectations of format. Would you want a bullet points? Do you want a paragraph? Do you want a slide deck? Do you want a PDF? Do you want an interactive tool? Whatever it is. C is clarification. So prompts can get quite long, right? So the C at the end, near the end, is to clarify everything else, because the way that these engines work is that they can sometimes forget what came first. So it's a restatement of the objective, but more succinctly, right? You are doing this, right? That's the task. You are creating a PowerPoint for my class, whatever it is. And then tone. Do you want it to be professorial? Do you want it to be casual? Do you want it to have some wit? They're not very funny, by the way.
That's a great template. I'm looking forward to looking at that in the book. One of the things that really excited me as somebody who was a clinician and used to teach PR and practice was that Seth says the binding of integrity to professional responsibility is sustained across the whole book and is a major contribution. Now, that I was so happy to see, because it is professional responsibility. How we use these tools are going to matter, and it will transfer right from the practice as a student into the profession. So you want to expand a little bit more about how the book does that?
Yeah, well, so I talk about it from the very beginning. When I teach AI in the law, I teach law practice technology or social media in the law, whatever I'm teaching, the first lesson is always on legal ethics. And I start with Rule 1.1, Comment 8. It talks about understanding the benefits and risks of technology, right? And a lot of lawyers don't know that that exists. It's been adopted by, at last count, I think is 40 states, some version of it. And so they need to understand that whatever tool that they're using, they are responsible for. There's a duty of supervision. There's a duty of reasonableness of fees. There's a duty of communication, of confidentiality. Like all of that applies to whatever technology you're using, whether it's email or Word in the cloud or whatever it is. And it applies dramatically, especially candor to the tribunal in the context of generative AI. So I do that in my classes. I wanted to make sure I did that in the book. I have 2 student chapters that talk about the link between academic integrity and professional responsibility, and that academic integrity is more than just an oath that you took in your 1L year saying that you agree to abide by the honor code. But I do take some honor code language that I found and kind of marry that to some of the standing orders that the courts have put in. And then also about syllabus, because students complain about, well, I don't know whether I'm allowed to use AI or not because it's not clear in the syllabus and the professor really hasn't said, and everybody's different. That one bugs me because every court is different. Get used to it. You're going to have to read the rules for every court you're in and every judge possibly. Right?
Excellent point.
So get used to it. You got to read the rules. And so what I did that, I took academic integrity principles and honor code principles and kind of marry those up with ethical rules. And so the 2 student chapters, one is really laying that out to them, that they are establishing whether they are going to abide by the rules, like the practices that they have now. Don't let them get ingrained if you're not following ethical rules now, because it's going to hurt you and your clients later on. And then there's a chapter on how they can use it and how they should use it and how they should not use it. Like they should never submit work from an AI and pass it off as their own. They have to verify everything just like attorneys do, just like law professors do, just like anybody who uses these programs has to do. You have to verify it. And I try to drive home, and I say this to 1Ls all the time, you do not know enough to know what's wrong, what's missing, right? You just don't know enough about the topic.
Yes.
So it could give what to you sounds fantastic, but you don't know anything yet. That's why you're in school, right? So you have to verify everything. You don't know if it's incomplete. You don't know if it's wrong. So everything has to be verified. And there are certain things you should use it for, and there are absolutely certain things you should not use it for.
So as between these 2 books that you were so brave to write in this moment when, like, as soon as something hits the page, it is virtually outdated. But it sounds like these are very living documents or publications. But I'm just curious, having a book that is focused on legal education, AI and legal education, and a book in AI in the practice of law. Can you summarize kind of the distinctions between those two areas, using it as a student or faculty member and using it in the practice of law, or are they duplicative?
They are and they're not. One thing, I talk to a lot of law firms. I'm going to talk to one in a couple of weeks. And some of the things that I talk to them about beyond ethics and beyond Formal Opinion 512 that talks about billing and what you can bill for and what you can't bill for. Students don't have that concern. They have a concern for communication. When do they have to tell their clients that they're using the generative AI or any other tech? Should it be in the representation agreement? What should the language look like? Those kinds of things that are everyday concerns to lawyers, right? Governance in the law firm. I think it's a great idea for law firms to create prompt libraries like that have been tested and proven to provide reliable outputs. So I talked to them about creating those. In fact, somebody today, I just downloaded an example earlier today. I think it's from Legal On, where they had an example prompt library. It had about 10 prompts in it. My prompt library is about 64 pages long, I think, the last time I looked at it.
Holy cow.
Yeah, it gets very long. But I have it for different audiences I talk to. I have different sections within them. So those are the concerns that practitioners have. They have to put in, I think now, especially they have to put in training mechanisms and retraining mechanisms. It's not like they can train once and then walk away and say, okay, we trained. They have to have a defensible process in place. If they do have to, tell the court what they did and why they did it, it should be a reasonable process that they've actually trained people. So all of those, they have real life concerns. But what I try to do especially in the student chapters, is talk to them about those concerns that lawyers have, that they need to get the right practices in place, the right habits in place to make sure that when they make the transition, that it's like second nature to them to question, should this actually go in to a platform? Maybe this should not even be in a platform. Should I anonymize this? How do I anonymize? What do I talk to a vendor about? What is it, what's the checklist for the vendors that I should go through to make sure that I've taken every reasonable step I can to protect client data? So all of those things. So there's overlap between the books. When you mentioned earlier the nutshells, thinking that they were for students, I did too. But I found out from Wes that it's really the practitioner market that buys the nutshells. I had no idea.
Interesting.
Yeah. So there's overlap there between those two. And I'm hoping that the students will get that as they read those two chapters that are devoted to them.
Well, in some ways, it's so tremendous that you are the expert that wrote the one for legal education and the one for the practice, because you can integrate them and you can reinforce what needs to be learned properly in one area to take it with them to another area.
Mm-hmm.
So we could talk for a long time about Gen AI and legal education and artificial intelligence and the practice of law. But I always ask the same final question to my guests, and I think that this question is especially perfect for you. And that is, what do you think the future of legal education will look like in the coming decade? How is it likely to change?
In the coming decade, that is big. That is a big question. I don't know. It's going to change. It has to change, right? Not only does it have to respond to the market, to the law firm market where our students are eventually going to go, and the clients are demanding that their firms get more efficient and to decrease billing and are smart enough to understand that they don't need to bill as much as they do for an NDA, for example, when it can be easily drafted themselves. So I don't know. So I like this analogy. I like to oil paint on the side. I'm not good at this, right? But I like to do it. And because of that, I study a lot about art. It's like the response from photography, right? It took a while for artists to realize, oh my gosh, we have competition now. And so they did in the past try to present exactly what they saw, right? But now photography made that easier and cheaper to do, especially for portraiture. So what did they do? Eventually, Impressionism came. So it wasn't exactly a true rendition of what they were looking at. It was the impression of what they were looking at. And nobody could have predicted that change, right? So it's going to look different, to extend the analogy a little bit. It's going to look different than it currently does. In the near term, term, I think law schools are doing a disservice, particularly to students who have learning disabilities and speak English as a second language, not to give them this extra tool and to not prepare them for the market. I serve on the board it's Hotshot is the name of the company, and they have a particular board for AI training.
Oh, yeah. We use Hotshot, actually. We're going to require the AI certificate training for all of our incoming 1Ls.
Yeah, good for you. I've been trying to get that done here. I get all of my law practice technology students, which is basically all of the students, they get that certification, and so do the AI students if they haven't already achieved it. So we were the first school, actually, to partner with them to do that.
Oh, very cool.
Yeah, but the board is made up of Mark Williams from Vanderbilt and Diane O'Leary from Suffolk and me. I think we're the only educators. I'm sorry if I missed somebody. And the rest, the other 12 or so on the board, are all from law firms, and they talk about training practitioners. And I asked them, like, what do you want the students to come in with? And they want them to come in with the knowledge of how these platforms work, what the limitations and benefits are to using them, the ethics behind them, ethical AI principles like fairness and transparency and auditability and those things. But they also want to see how students think. So they'll allow them to use generative AI, but they have to show the entire iterative process of their prompts before they actually produce anything. So they can see not just that they're just putting something in, accepting what comes out, but actually how they're reviewing what comes out, the output, and then changing it and iterating through that whole thing gives them a great window into how students think.
That is some really terrific advice for us in law schools, because I think that's what we're all asking. What is it the practitioners are expecting? What are the law firms looking for? How much AI do we have to teach in law school? So that's super helpful information. Well, I have really enjoyed this conversation, and I hope that those who are listening have enjoyed it as well. Please follow Seth Chandler and my advice and read the book. It's available through Callie's website.
And get the appendices.
And get the appendices. Well, I'm glad you said that, because I did not download the appendices, so now I have to go back and do that. But the book is GenAI in Legal Education, A Practical Guide for Professors and Students by Callie E. Langdale Press. And then the second book for practitioners, Artificial Intelligence and the Practice of Law in a Nutshell. So congratulations, Korin, on the publication of these two books that are going to really inform how we are all responding in the profession and legal education to AI.
Thank you. Thank you so much for inviting me. This was a lot of fun.
Great. Well, if you've enjoyed this conversation and you want to listen to additional thought leaders in legal education, please check out your favorite podcast channel or the Aspen Leading Edge podcast webpage. Thank you.